the kind of business that we want to build is basically like integrity is number one. We want everybody to feel like they're acting as an owner, like really take the problem that our customers are having as if it's your problem, right? And you are working for them as their data scientist. Then what is your recommendation? What is your best recommendation or advice for them?
Welcome to the Horizon Lab podcast. In this episode, we speak with John Chao. Now, John Chao is the founder of Tresl. Tresl is a revolutionary way that Shopify brands are now looking at their consumer data analytics. So, without further ado, let's welcome John. Hey, John, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Austin. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, John, how did your journey in data science begin, and what initially sparked your interest in the field?
I guess I was always kind of like a math person. Ever since I guess little, I was always into science, and I did well in like I guess physics. When I was in college, I actually started as a math major, and then I sort of like tacked on like statistics because like the senior level math started to like lose meaning to me. It was like getting too abstract, and so I picked up like statistics, and I thought, you know what, like the ability to predict the future, which was a lot of the statistical modeling was for, felt like it was generally going to be useful, right? So it was like I was always in math and stats, and so my first job out of Stanford grad school was at a demand forecasting price optimization company. My title at the time was like statistician or statistical modeler. This is like back in 2006, before data scientist was a thing. So that's kind of where I cut my teeth.
Nice, man. And so you've lived in different parts of the world, like US, Taiwan. How has the global experience shaped your perspective being a co-founder and owner of the company?
I would say like definitely more global view, sort of like getting sort of assimilated into different cultures. Learning different languages is useful. I would say like the biggest culture shock for me is probably when I studied at in Palo Alto at Stanford, where like it was just a completely new world to me. Like whereas like when I grew up in Taiwan, it was more traditional, study hard, do your homework situation. When I was in Canada, in my high school and undergrad, it was more, obviously North American culture, but it was very, I would say like a bit easier. I would say it's just like I had more time to, hang out with friends or do sports or do other stuff where I didn't get to sort of before as much. But Stanford was completely different, right? Like there was just like a lot of smart people. Everybody was like from the top of the class somewhere in the world. Everybody was there, and everyone talked about like startups, right? Entrepreneurship. You could feel like even when like Facebook was getting started, it felt like it was just like down the street from us, right? Like and so that was kind of a big culture shock to me. And so kind of a privilege being there, and I really enjoyed my time sort of in Silicon Valley. It was just like a magical place. And so I would say probably that's where I started the idea of like I want to start my company someday. Whereas like before, I didn't really kind of have those ideas. Like when I was growing up in Taiwan, I never thought about that.
Interesting. So do you have teams in different languages?
Yeah, so like my co-founder is still in California, in the Silicon Valley, and then we kind of actually started. So the reason I moved back again to Taiwan was basically because of COVID. My wife was pregnant at the time, and so we didn't want to be sheltered in place, and so we kind of just like went back to Taiwan where there was less COVID, and so she had our son, our second baby there in Taiwan, and then COVID kind of actually helped our business grow, and we were able to start fundraising actually in Taiwan, and closed our sort of seed funding, and so started building a team from there on. So it was interesting, right? Because we were basically in COVID, and so almost of our work were done remotely. Even to this day, we are pretty much like fully remote.
Interesting. And what tools do you have in place to manage remote teams?
Notion, Slack, those are probably the biggest.
Yeah.
Google Meets, right? Like I think we tried a bunch of different tools, but we ended up staying basically just within the Google suite of like Gmail and Google Meet, and that worked for us.
Nice, man. Nice. And do you guys use flex time, or is it everybody has set hours, or can they work whenever they want? How does it work?
Yeah, it's actually pretty flexible, right? Like, I mean, as I would imagine, most remote teams are probably pretty flexible. We do have regular, like sort of like all hands or scrum meetings are at fixed times, and so those we basically have the required team members would basically all show up at the time to the online meeting room, and then we meet in the office right now regularly once every 2 weeks. But we have actually an office space in Taipei, and people could go there and just like work at the desk if they choose to,
Oh.
but it's not mandatory.
So does everybody on your team speak Mandarin then?
Yeah, basically both. All everybody's bilingual. We conduct most all of our meetings and documentation, everything in English, but everybody does speak in Mandarin.
Interesting, interesting. Okay,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, it works
So
for us.
uh, no, that's good. That's good. We do something similar. Most of our team is speaks Portuguese. They're from Angola
Hmm.
and Brazil, so we do a
Okay,
little bit of the same thing. Yeah, yeah,
nice.
yeah. So I see you worked at LinkedIn, man. Can you tell me more about what you did over there?
Like a lot of predictive modeling, segmentation, machine learning stuff. I think when I started, I was on the sales solutions team, and so we were building. Let me think. So my first job was to create a sales definition, basically. Like, so LinkedIn had like 500 million members at the time. There were a lot of members are actually on there doing outreach for sales, right? Like developing leads, talking to customers. So there was like obviously the recruiting piece of it, but actually a lot of customers are on there using the professional network to reach out to sales folks or potential leads. We wanted to create a new business line. Well, I mean, LinkedIn created a new business line, but we wanted to know how many, for example, sales persons or like sales members might be there. And so we were basically going in and trying to create like a taxonomy for defining sales professionals. And so that was kind of my first job. Obviously, that led to a lot of segmentation, different modeling, and we eventually built a model to sort of predict who's going to buy our sales product. So that was kind of very interesting as well.
Interesting. Did you find that that model was accurate?
So like I mean the results first, right? So we actually in the end we actually launched it, but it was a very it was like a journey to get it to launch. But we actually got a 20% close rate lift from using the model when we actually deployed it to all of our field sales team. So the thing about LinkedIn is actually everybody knows about the sort of like job recruiter or whatever subscription that your $20 subscription, but actually the most of this money from offline sales from like companies like Facebook or Google buying the recruiter seats to be able to actually tap into the talent pool, right? We actually have like almost half of the company, 50% of the company is like professional services, including like sales folks and marketing, business operations and different types of folks. And so they needed a book of business, right? The book of business is basically just a bunch of accounts, and these accounts are more or less customers are on LinkedIn, right? So basically, we want to create like a ranking system. If you're a salesperson, you got to talk to 500 people or 500 accounts on your book of business. Like, how do you know where to start? Is there a way to prioritize or score each of these accounts, which are companies, where it helps your work, go smoother or like close the ones that you should close first? So that was kind of the premise. And so we created this like account propensity score, as we called it. And it was it's a kind of bit of a it was like a I learned a lot through this process. I would say it was it didn't go off well at first, but eventually we launched it and we had a lot of success.
Do you find that a lot of software products, AI products, they oftentimes don't go the way as planned or don't go well at first, but eventually they do get that?
In this, I mean, my biggest lesson learned there was like it's not all about the model, right? It's actually a lot of it is about people and like how to work with people. So there's obviously a little bit of like big company policy and things like that, but actually in the end it wasn't really just like that, right? Like one of the things that my sales so I work with like basically the sales folks, right? And they have a operations team as well. And so the sales operations person asked me a question, right? He's like, John, like, do you believe in this model? And I said, yes. And he said, well, if your salary depended on it, do you still believe in it? Like, if you got it wrong, someone's kids may not get fed, right? Like, do you believe it that much? So I was like, let me get back to you, right? Like, I feel like that kind of realness really made me think twice, right? Like, I should maybe do all my due diligence, do all the checks, I just confirm everything that as much as I can. Because what we're talking about is fundamentally changing how sales folks might need to sell. And that could have real consequences, right? And so this is why they're super careful about like launching things. And that really hit me hard because like it was just like math or like numbers until that point, right? But then if you really need people to change their behavior based on your predictions or your model says, you've got to really make sure like you are confident.
Nice. And so do you find that now that you run your own company that it's the same type of responsibility? Did that kind of teach you how to deal with that level of stress a little bit?
For sure. Like I think from day one, the kind of business that we want to build is basically like integrity is number one, right? Like that's what we put in our company value, right? And then we say like it's kind of like the No Rules book by Netflix founder Reed Hastings, right? It's like freedom and responsibility, right? Like the more freedom you have, the more responsibility you have, and so we want everybody to feel like they're acting as an owner, which is actually something we borrow from LinkedIn as well. But like really take the problem that our customers are having as like if as if it's your problem, right? And you are working for them as their data scientist, then what is your recommendation? What is your best recommendation or advice for them? And how do you make sure like the data or the quality of everything that you are providing in reports or insights, all these things are accurate? And so that's one thing that we obviously stress and focus on internally.
Nice. So you mentioned that you try to empower everybody to be an owner. So what do you do in order to empower these people, and how does that end up
Mhm.
looking like?
So for example, like we use like a version of Scrum that is like started by the Basecamp founders. I think it's DHH, and I think it's called the words escape me for now right now, but it's like what do we call it? I'm gonna have to get back to you on it. But they have a book about how Shape Up. I think it's what it's called. It's
Shape
called
up.
Shape Up. Yep. And so it basically talks about letting the team who's doing the work sort of define the detailed tasks and how to get there. And the designer, the product person, or the leaders are basically just like in broad strokes painting the picture of vision of where we need to what we need to do, right? And so the classic one was like a calendar example, right? You want to build a calendar. Do you draw everything out in super detail with like a PRD and all these things, or do you just have like broad strokes of like, I know this is a calendar, there's grids, dates are going to be on there, and there are some controls and some buttons, affordances that need to be included, and then the rest of the details on how to get there, what to build, is left for the team to kind of fill it in, right? And so that's kind of our process in product development for most of the engineering work we do and data science work we do.
Interesting. And so then what does your team look like? Do you have a project manager? Do you have a lead? Do you have pair lead
It's basically
developers
like,
with juniors?
I mean, obviously we've had like people come and go a little bit, but the core team right now is basically like the two co-founders, front end person, a back end data architect person, data scientist, and a designer. And so we don't have like a dedicated product manager, for example. Basically, me and Tony, my co-founder, we're kind of the product managers, and the team themselves are basically like also product managing a little bit when they discuss with each other. The designer, the front end, everyone basically contributes.
Nice. Nice. That's cool, man. So tell me a little bit more about your company and what you guys do.
Sure, yeah. So my company is called Tresl. Our product Segments Analytics is uh, basically a data science platform for Shopify merchants, right? And so we wanted to create um, a solution that would make data science more accessible to e-commerce, to Shopify marketers, operators, and folks alike, because we found that most data scientists or data talent is very expensive very expensive, and it's like basically only like the top 5% of the companies are like hoarding all the talent, right? And everyone else either can't afford it, or it's like too expensive to retain them, or doesn't have like the data DNA, or even just like does it really make sense to start like a data practice inside, right, internally. And so we want to create sort of data science for millions of companies, and so that became basically the premise for Tresl. And Segments is our first product. It's aimed at helping, I would say, Shopify merchants to self-serve a lot of their marketing, segmentation, insights, reporting, and also automation.
Interesting. So, say I'm a Shopify e-commerce store and I sell
Mhm.
T-shirts, for example.
Mhm.
How would I integrate your product into my platform? How much would it cost? How does that work?
I mean, it's available in the Shopify App Store, so it's one click to install, and then we start basically pulling your data and building the data models on the back end. Once you're in, you can basically use our AI segmentation feature. We kind of just call it like filter GPT. You can type in your sentence, and then we will build a segment for you. It turns that language into filters and queries on the back end. We have hundreds of filters that like only we have and not available in Shopify or in other email platforms. Once the segment is built, a lot of our customers are syncing it to their email, to their SMS, to Meta and Google for email campaigns or like ad campaigns, retargeting, that sort of stuff.
Interesting. So, let's rewind. So, how was it starting out the company? How long have you guys been around, and what was the first 6 months, 1 year like?
We started in like 2018, 2019. Initially, I think Tony maybe have already quit, and I was probably part time, and I think I quit in 2019. And so the first 6 months was a lot of just like crawling Facebook forum, right? Like I think we had a bare bones MVP that had basically what we wanted to do was we wanted to create like a really intuitive product, right? Like intuitive analytics product that isn't just about like, give a date range, draw a chart, which is like what you consider like most analytics tools, I would say. So our first attempt was why don't we just turn every single module into like a question, right? So our page looked like a lot of questions. Like the first question might be like, oh, what is your revenue last month, right? And so then you click that section, and then basically there's a chart. What is the best time that people are visiting your site? What is your top channel of like sales or things like that? So we basically added a bunch of, if it really felt like Q&A type of questions and answering. And so every question would have a chart, and then it would have some explanation. And that was like our first MVP product. And then we added like RFM segmentation. And that was when we sort of started getting our first customers.
Interesting. And how long did it take to get the initial MVP?
Um, I mean, the MVP took us probably like a month or 2 months to build. And then I think our first paying customers was like soon after. It was probably like the third month. Yeah, probably like around the third month in.
Yeah, you guys had some early successes then.
I I don't know if that counts, but like I mean, it was a grind, right? Like it was really like the first 10 customers was like a very slow grind, just trying to like get people to try our product, try to meet them, try to talk to them, try to like answer their questions or build things that they would need. And so yeah, so like I mean, it took us probably like 6 months to get probably like 10 customers, and then probably like another 6 months to get like from like 10 to like 30 or something, 30 or 50, somewhere around there. Yeah, so I mean, it was not easy. It was a lot of like answering, like just emailing people or like messaging folks on Facebook, trying to like jump into the fray, jump into the discussions and just like monitor the forums and things like that.
Interesting. When you guys started, was it just you and your co-founder, or did you already have a
Yep.
team?
No, it's just us. Yeah.
So you guys actively coded all this as well.
Pretty much, yeah. We it was just the two of us for probably like the first year and a half, 2 years. Yeah.
Sounds pretty normal, right?
Yeah. I would say so. Like I mean there are some teams that come out and raise and hit the ground running, but well maybe those days are gone.
Yeah. Interesting, interesting. So how was it when you started hiring your first team members? Was that like a big transition for you guys?
I think so. Like, I mean, definitely, it was very. We were quite careful in picking the our first like founding members, right? Like, we wanted people who are very hands-on, entrepreneurial, not afraid of a challenge, can work, in a very fast-paced environment, get shit done, type of attitude, right? So that, like, it wasn't that easy. Because we actually started building our team in Taiwan, right? Like, because I was here, and so I started interviewing folks, and I interviewed a lot of people, um, and like I think it's easier to find that type of startup personnel or that mindset in maybe in like Silicon Valley or parts of US where there's like a lot of startups. But in Taiwan, there's like not that many software startups, and so it was kind of hard to find the right people with the right set of skills. And we had to eventually basically coach a lot of them into doing things this way. So that was kind of a fun challenge.
Is there a price difference between the salaries in Taiwan and in the US?
Yeah, there was, I mean, a huge, yeah, in a difference in pay scale for sure. I would say like an engineer in Taiwan is generally more affordable than the Silicon Valley, right? Because it's like
Yeah,
the going rate for like a software engineer, even like a junior person in the Bay Area is like nowadays is probably like closer to 200K. But like 10, 15 years ago, it was probably more like 100 to 150K. So
right. Well, that makes sense. Wonderful, man. So if anybody wanted to reach out to you and to start using your platform, how would they find you?
I mean, they can seek us out on Shopify App Store, Segments Analytics, or you can type Tresl Segments, so Tresl, Segments Segments. Our website is www.tresl.co. So yeah, they can always reach out to us via either the our website or the app store directly.
Wonderful. Well, I really appreciate having you on the podcast, John. And I loved your story, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right, thanks, Austin. It's great to be here.